The palace doctor stumbles backward, his hands shaking as he stares at what should be a corpse. The man on the floor is coughing up pink froth and clawing at the carpet. This is impossible. He watched him consume enough cyanide to kill 5 men. Yet somehow, Grigory Rasputin is still breathing. It's December 1916, and Russia is hemorrhaging. 2.5 years into the Great War, millions are dead, the economy is collapsing, and bread lines stretch for blocks. The Tsar is at the front playing general, while his German-born wife runs the government from St. Petersburg. And everyone knows who really controls her. The wild-eyed peasant from Siberia who claims to heal her son. They call him the Mad Monk, a holy man, a fraud, a demon. But tonight, a group of aristocrats has decided he's something simpler, a problem that needs solving. What happens next will become one of history's most bizarre murder stories, retold in books, films, and conspiracy theories for over a century. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Most of it is fiction. The real story is stranger, darker, and reveals something far more unsettling about power, desperation, and how legends are born from lies. The Man Who Wouldn't Die. Let's rewind 6 weeks. Rasputin is at the height of his influence, which means he's also at the peak of everyone's hatred. Felix Yusupov, one of Russia's richest princes, is watching his world crumble. The war is lost, revolution is brewing, and he's convinced that one man is responsible for all of it. Felix isn't some random noble with a grudge. He's married into the royal family, educated at Oxford, and owns a palace that makes Versailles look modest. He's also possibly in love with Rasputin in that complicated early 20th century way that nobody talks about directly. He's been visiting the holy man for months, claiming to seek spiritual guidance while actually planning murder. The conspiracy forms quietly. Felix recruits Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, the Tsar's cousin. Then Vladimir Purishkevich, a right-wing politician who gives speeches in the Duma about how Rasputin is destroying Russia. Dr. Stanislaus Lazovert joins to provide the poison. And finally, an army officer named Sukhotin, though he'll barely appear in the story. They plan for weeks, obsessing over details like anxious wedding planners. Felix will lure Rasputin to his palace basement with promises of meeting his beautiful wife. The doctor will lace cakes and wine with potassium cyanide. They'll wait upstairs while the poison does its work. Clean, quiet, patriotic. December 16th arrives. Felix's palace is prepared like a stage set. The basement dining room is decorated to look cozy and inviting. Cakes sit on delicate plates. Wine waits in crystal glasses. Upstairs, a phonograph plays scratchy romantic music to create the illusion that Felix's wife is entertaining guests. Just after midnight, Felix collects Rasputin personally. The holy man arrives wearing a silk blouse embroidered by the Tsarina herself, his long beard freshly combed. He's suspicious, but intrigued. Felix has been promising this meeting for weeks. They descend into the basement. Rasputin sits. Felix, nervous and stalling, offers him the poisoned cakes. Rasputin eats one, then another. Felix watches, waiting for the man to clutch his throat and collapse. Nothing happens. The wine then. Surely the wine will work. Rasputin drinks a glass, then another. He complains it's too sweet, but asks for more. Felix is sweating now, glancing at the ceiling where his co-conspirators are pacing, probably wondering what's taking so long. 2 hours pass. Rasputin is slightly drunk but otherwise fine, asking about Felix's wife and when she'll come downstairs. Felix excuses himself and runs upstairs where the others are panicking. Purishkevich suggests they abort. Dmitry is chain-smoking. The doctor is rechecking his cyanide calculations, insisting the dose should have killed Rasputin 5 times over. Felix grabs Dmitry's revolver and goes back downstairs. He's abandoned the plan entirely now, operating on pure desperation. He convinces Rasputin to look at a crucifix on the wall. As the holy man's back is turned, Felix raises the gun and fires directly into his chest. Rasputin drops like a stone. Finally, Felix and the others rush downstairs. The doctor checks for a pulse, finds none, and declares him dead. They're giddy with relief, already planning how to dispose of the body. But they make one crucial mistake. They leave him alone. Minutes later, Felix returns to the basement one last time, drawn by some morbid curiosity to look at the body. That's when Rasputin's eyes snap open. He lunges at Felix, grabbing him by the throat, his eyes wild and somehow still alive. Felix tears free and runs screaming up the stairs while behind him, impossibly, Rasputin begins crawling toward the exit on his hands and knees. Purishkevich hears the screaming and rushes outside to find Rasputin stumbling across the snow-covered courtyard, blood trailing behind him, somehow still moving despite a bullet in his chest and enough poison to kill an elephant. The sight is so absurd, so impossibly horrifying, that Purishkevich freezes for a moment before raising his own revolver and firing twice. Both shots miss. Rasputin is heading toward the gate now, shouting for help. A third shot hits him in the shoulder. He keeps going. The fourth shot finally brings him down, striking the back of his head. Rasputin collapses face first into the snow. This time he doesn't get up, but the conspirators aren't taking chances anymore. They beat the body with clubs, wrap it in cloth, bind it with rope, and drive it to the Neva River. They find a spot where the ice has been broken and shove him through. The body disappears beneath the black water. They stand there breathing hard, watching the hole in the ice, waiting to see if somehow he'll climb back out. He doesn't. They leave. The next morning, Rasputin's daughter files a missing persons report. She knows exactly where her father went the previous night because he told her. Felix's name is mentioned immediately. The police start asking questions. Felix and his co-conspirators stick to their prepared story. They have no idea what happened, but nobody believes them, partly because Purishkevich can't keep his mouth shut. He starts bragging about the murder on a train to the front, treating it like a heroic act that saved Russia. Within days, everyone knows. The Tsarina is devastated, writing desperate letters to her husband about how their dear friend has been murdered by traitors. Nicholas returns to the palace and orders an investigation. 2 days after the murder, Rasputin's body is discovered beneath the ice, identified by the silk shirt the Tsarina embroidered. An autopsy is performed by Professor Dmitry Kosorotov. This is where the legend really begins, because over the years, various sources will claim the autopsy showed water in Rasputin's lungs, suggesting he was still alive when thrown into the river. They'll say he clawed at the ice from below, his fingernails scraped raw trying to escape. It's a perfect ending to an already impossible story. The man who survived poison and bullets, drowned while trying to claw his way out of a frozen river. Except it's almost certainly not true. The actual autopsy report, which still exists, makes no mention of water in the lungs. It describes the gunshot wounds and notes his blood alcohol level was low, meaning he wasn't particularly drunk, despite drinking poisoned wine for hours. The story about him drowning alive appears to have been added later, probably by people who wanted to make the tale even more dramatic than it already was. Still, the basic facts remain bizarre enough without embellishment. Rasputin ate and drank enough cyanide to kill several men and barely seemed affected. He survived being shot at close range, then crawled outside and took 3 more bullets before finally dying. Why didn't the poison work? The most likely explanation is surprisingly mundane. Potassium cyanide loses its potency when heated or mixed with sugar. The conspirators baked it into cakes and mixed it with sweet wine, possibly neutralizing it completely. Or maybe the doctor simply failed to add enough, despite his confident calculations. The alcohol might have slowed the absorption of what little poison remained active. As for why Rasputin survived the first gunshot, that's less mysterious. Bullets don't always kill instantly, even when they hit the chest. People survive gunshot wounds regularly, especially if major organs are missed. Rasputin was probably running on pure adrenaline and shock when he made his escape attempt. None of this makes the story less disturbing, just less supernatural. But the legend of Rasputin's impossible death spreads faster than the truth. Within weeks, people across Russia are talking about the holy man who couldn't be killed, who survived poison, bullets, and drowning. Some see it as proof of his demonic powers. Others view it as divine protection for a true holy man murdered by aristocrats. The Tsarina wants Felix and Dmitri executed, but Nicholas refuses. Felix is exiled to his estate. Dmitri is sent to the Persian front, which probably saves his life since he's out of the country when the revolution comes. Purishkevich, the politician who couldn't stop bragging, gets nothing more than a stern talking to. The conspirators assumed killing Rasputin would restore faith in the monarchy, that removing this corrupting influence would somehow fix everything wrong with Russia. Instead, his murder becomes another sign of how disconnected the aristocracy is from reality. They think one death will solve systemic problems. They think violence is politics. They think they're heroes. 2 months later, revolution sweeps through Petrograd. The Tsar abdicates. The Romanov dynasty, which ruled Russia for 3 centuries, collapses in days. The family is imprisoned, moved from palace to palace, and eventually murdered in a basement in Ekaterinburg. Rasputin's prediction, the one he supposedly wrote before his death, seems to come true. If nobles kill him, the Tsar's family won't survive 2 years. Of course, that letter is probably fake too, written after the fact to make the story even more prophetic. But it doesn't matter. People believe it. The myth is more powerful than the truth. Rasputin's body, meanwhile, goes on one last journey. The Tsarina has him buried in a chapel being built at Tsarskoye Selo. When revolutionaries discover the grave in March 1917, they dig him up. According to legend, they burn his corpse, and it sits up in the flames, appearing to come back to life one final time. This is physically impossible. Bodies don't reanimate when burned. What actually happens is that heat causes tendons to contract, making corpses move or even sit upright during cremation. It's disturbing, but completely natural. Still, the image sticks. Rasputin rising from the flames, impossible to kill even in death. His daughter Maria escapes Russia and ends up in Paris, then America. She works as a dancer, then a lion tamer in the circus. She spends decades trying to correct the record about her father, insisting he was a holy man corrupted by others, not the monster history remembers. She writes memoirs. She sues people for defamation. She even sues a movie studio and wins a settlement. None of it matters. The legend is set. Rasputin becomes shorthand for a certain type of figure, the manipulative advisor whispering in the ruler's ear, the mystic with too much influence, the unkillable menace. Every few decades, someone gets called a modern Rasputin in the press. But here's what actually makes Rasputin's story significant. It's not the supernatural elements or the dramatic murder. It's what his rise says about power and collapse. The Romanovs ruled the largest empire on earth. They had armies, bureaucracies, centuries of tradition behind them. And yet, a peasant from Siberia with no formal education or official position gained more influence over the throne than any minister or general. Not through force or wealth, but by offering something the empress desperately needed: hope for her son. That's the real horror of the story. Not that Rasputin had demonic powers, but that he didn't need any. The system was so fragile, so isolated from reality, that one person with the right access at the right moment could throw everything off balance. The Tsar and Tsarina surrounded themselves with yes men and mysticism instead of dealing with strikes, shortages, and military disasters. They confused loyalty with competence, faith with governance. Rasputin didn't cause the Russian Revolution. The revolution was coming with or without him, driven by inequality, war exhaustion, and a ruling class that refused to adapt. But his presence accelerated the loss of faith in the monarchy. Every rumor about him, true or not, made the throne look weaker. Every appointment he influenced made the government less functional. He became the physical embodiment of everything wrong with the old order. And the aristocrats who killed him learned nothing. They thought removing one man would restore order, as if Russia's problems were that simple. They celebrated his death while the country burned around them. Felix Purishkevich wrote proud memoirs about the murder. They genuinely believed they were patriots saving Russia. Instead, they just added another corpse to the pile. Within months, they were fleeing the country or facing firing squads themselves. The revolution they feared came anyway, only now it was too late to stop. The moderates lost control to the Bolsheviks. The Civil War killed millions. The Romanovs were erased. Rasputin's legend, meanwhile, only grew. Books, movies, songs, even a disco hit in the 1970s. Each retelling adds new details, most of them false. The poison gets more dramatic. The number of bullets increases. The ice on the river gets thicker. He becomes less a historical figure and more a folktale, the bogeyman who wouldn't die. But strip away the mythology, and what remains is somehow more disturbing than any legend. A man with genuine talent for easing pain, who used that gift to gain power he had no ability to manage. A royal family so desperate they put their faith in anyone who offered certainty. A court so corrupt that competence mattered less than connections. A murder plot carried out by amateurs who thought violence was strategy. And a system so broken that all of this was enough to help topple an empire. That's what makes Rasputin's story worth remembering. Not the supernatural elements, but the utterly human disasters that happen when power becomes performance, when desperation replaces judgment, and when everyone mistakes symptoms for the disease. The conspirators thought they were saving Russia by killing one man. They were actually just rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. Rasputin's real power was never supernatural. It was being in the right place when an empire was desperate enough to believe in anything. His impossible death became legend because people needed it to be impossible. They needed him to be a demon because admitting he was just a man made everything worse. It meant there was no evil force corrupting Russia from within, just rot, incompetence, and a ruling class that mistook mysticism for governance. The revolution came anyway. The Romanovs died anyway. And Rasputin's legend outlived them all, growing stranger with each retelling. Sometimes the most unbelievable part of history isn't what happened, but how desperately we need to believe it happened differently.